today's call is we're going to talk about creating projects and estimating within those projects. And we're going to do this with what we, have coined the phrase, the Workamajig way. So what I'm going to be doing is showing you the process, kind of the method to our madness on how we picture Workamajig being used to not only create projects, but then also create the estimates within the projects. So just so you know, because I see a couple of questions coming through about this, all of the webinars are recorded. And with these, you can find the recording of the webinar. It usually takes us a couple of days to get them up into the help guide. But once they're up in the help guide, you can go and actually follow them. And you can follow the help guide. In fact, I'll show you if you go to Workamajig and you open the help guide, you can type in, webinar in the search. Right, and so you can go and look at any past webinars, and you can look at any upcoming webinars. And with our new help guide that you have here, you're able to actually follow this article. So when something new is added or updates are made, you can certainly go through and you'll get notified of those changes. But also any of our past webinars that we've done before, you can go through and get the recording of all of those. So again, it takes a couple of days for us to kind of edit and get the recording up there, but it should be in there in a couple of days. So you can also do a follow on this page right here, and you'll be notified when we upload that webinar. All right, so let's get started with creating a project in Workamajig. And in Workamajig, for the Workamajig way, like I said, we'll use that phrase quite a bit. To create a new project in Workamajig, we actually have to backtrack just a little bit, and we're going to go to our admin manager, our system setup. Under global list, we have what we call project templates. So when a project is created in Workamajig, we always recommend creating that project by copying from a template. So generally the amount of work and setup that has to happens in the template, and then creating a project by copying from that template makes it easy. Plus it provides a standard setup for each of your new projects that are created. And I'll show you then too the value of creating a project by copying from a template. So if you come in here, I'm just going to go, I have a list of different templates, and my templates of course are, pertain to the different types of projects that I do. Now, one of the things we're not doing in this training call is we're not going through and talking about how to set up templates and create the timelines and items like that in the template. If you want more detail on that, or you want to get a more in-depth training, that's when you're going to email training@workamajig.com, and you're going to ask the scheduler to set up a time for you to talk to your account manager, where they can go through in detail, again, how to set up your templates if you're looking to kind of follow that Workamajig way in creating your projects. So I'm going to go into my template that I have down here, and I'm just going to show you kind of what we're talking about. So really the whole purpose when setting up the template is to kind of preset that schedule that you have in the template. And you'll see here my template is for a web ad revision, right? And then I have my tasks right here. So I have my tasks listed. We have a summary task and my detail task. We've also assigned a number of days to each one of these tasks here. This is how many days that it would generally take for, I tell people when setting up a template, in the perfect world, how many days would it take to, do the revised copy, how many for an internal review, how many for a client review, and that's what you set up at the template level. When you create a project by copying from your template, then you can make changes, according to the plan that's happening for that particular project. So when you, and in here, so just so you know, this is in your admin system setup. So I'll just go back a little bit. Somebody was just asking how I got here. So if this is in your admin manager, system setup, global list, this in project templates, and then I click into my project template here, and I'm in the schedule of this template. So again, these are my tasks, summary task and detail tasks right here. The number of days, these are calendar days. So we're talking, this is going to take 2 calendar days. But, everyone says, well, what about hours? Well, this is where at the template level, we assign services, right? We don't know. This template could be used tomorrow. This template could be used 6 months from now. So we don't really know the person who would be doing the revised copy, but we do know what service or labor or function that would be need to be provided to complete that task. So you'll see here when I assigned, and I even allocated hours, right? So you can see I have art for my revised copy. I need some art and creative design for 2 hours and copywriting for 4 hours, right? And so I've assigned or allocated those hours here. And then and I went down the line for each of the different tasks, and I assigned the different services or roles here. We also have predecessors, which will create that timeline. We won't see a date function here within the template because, again, this template could be used tomorrow or it could be used, down the line. So we don't really have dates that pertain to this, but we can say that my internal review can't be completed until we've completed the revised copy, or actually can't be started until we've completed revised copy. So we've put in the predecessor. So we've created, again, ahead of time, we've created a timeline, right? So this is, what we look at when we're talking about setting up a template is we're setting up, again, the tasks that need to be completed, the general number of days it would take to complete them. We're assigning the role or service to that task. And again, we're setting up these predecessors to create the timeline. Also, too, we have the feature here for tracking budgets, which, again, that really comes down to whether you're going to be able to estimate against that task, and also whether you're going to be able to put time or expenses against that task. Now, with all of this set up right here, again, if you want a lot more detail on this or how to set up templates and things, like within your own agency, then you can certainly set up a time to talk to your account manager who will walk you through it in more detail. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how this information relates, to creating the project and how it carries through. Now, there are also some other system setup options that you're going to see when I create the project that will, affect the project as we create it. And at the end of the call, we'll backtrack just a little bit to come back to our admin system setup so I can show you where you can customize those areas, right? So I'm going to close this here, close here. And now we do have many different ways to get to one area. So if I wanted to go to the project manager area here, I can click the plus sign to create a project right from here. You also have the shortcut to the plus sign up here, which would allow you to go here and then create a project from this menu. But also if you're in your project area here, then you would also be able to create the plus sign right here to create a new project. So a lot of different ways to get to the same area. I'm sorry, my chat little bubble here is getting in my way. Also too, there was a question on how the path for PMs to get to, the admin path versus the PM path to get to projects. So again, the templates are not a project. The templates are part of your system setup. For project area, you have your project manager dot, and here is the project dot to get to like an active project dashboard versus the today PM page, which would allow you to get to a today page for your PMs. But I also wanted to see you in the active project dashboard here, which I don't have any active projects yet. We're going to make one soon. You do have the ability to get to the templates from here also. Okay, so I'm just going to click the plus sign here. The whole purpose of this, right, is to be able to create a project. So I'm going to click the plus sign right here to create a project, and here's my new project page. For those of you who are admins in your system, the first time you go to create a project here in Platinum, you might want to pay attention to that there's a system settings option up here, and there are some settings that are set for this new page. For instance, if you want to, require people to enter, an account manager in the account manager field, or, things like that, or show the project number. There's some other features right here in the system setup. Other than that, what you see here, it will look like this when you first get into the screen. So these are the general, this is the general fields that need to be filled out to create a project. And I click here to pick my client, right? And I can name my project, right? So I can't type, but we can name my project. Now, of course, this is where, the magic happens, right? We spend all that time and effort and energy into creating the perfect templates that we have in the system. So this is where I would go to pick my template that I want to create my project based off of. I can type in my description here, right? And then I can put in the start date of my project. By default, it will default to today's date, and then I can put in a due date of when this project should be completed, right? So that is the general due date of my project. You'll see again kind of a show more right here, and the show more just will give you more fields that you can take a look at. For instance, if you use account teams or if you need to update the project type, things like that. So generally, again, those are items that will default in based on your system settings, so you don't need to do that. But people always kind of want to know where some fields went, so you can take a look at that under the Show More. And I'm just going to hit Save. Somebody was asking about the project number. The system will automatically create a project number for you based on your project numbering method that you have in system setup. And I will show you the project numbering method, where that's at and how you can make changes to that at the end of the call. That's part of the system setup. But if you're kind of one of those agencies that like to manually enter in a project number or make changes to it, that's part of the system settings right up here where you can show the project number field. But what we try to do in this is we're trying to reduce the amount of information that you have to put in or have to look at on the screen, because again, the project number is designed to default in from your system setup, right? It's like a next global number or a number from the client, so that we don't show that here. But when I click Save, you'll see here, this is my project number. I simplified my project numbering method. It's pretty much just a 2-digit number, but I will show you in system setup again how you can have a 2-digit year. You can use the client ID. You can have a global number, a next number from the client, right? But this would be the system automatically generated my project number right here. Now, when I create my project from copying from the template, this is what we were talking about. I go into my schedule right here, and you can see here are my tasks that copied over from my template, right? Here's my assignments that copied over from my template, my number of days that copied over, and you can see that number of days translated into a timeline, right? So my first task is happening on the 9th of July for 2 days, so it's going to the 9th and the 10th to the 11th. And Workamajig, of course, is designed to automatically skip weekends as non-working days. We can certainly discuss whether if you want everyone to work on Saturdays, that's part of the project setup that you can, include that in. But by default, this is the project schedule that copied over from my template. Now, the one nice thing about copying from the template, of course, is the fact that this is all, set up for me, but it doesn't mean that everything is set in stone. If you need to make a change or make adjustments, for the client or just, again, for the time frame, I can come in and I can certainly make a change to my project schedule. And you'll see that, that change, I made it 3 days. And so you can see that my timeline automatically adjusted. Now, couple of things about this screen right here is, again, I'm looking at the basic task information. You do have the ability to come over here and show task detail. So if you would like to see a little bit, more information or more detail about that task, you can open a panel up on the right and be able to see that information, right? So this is, again, my schedule that copied over from my template. I can add, I can remove, I can adjust any of those areas that I need to do here. Just one second, I was reading a question in the chat. All right, so in here, so again, this is the planned start date that I have. So just so you know, somebody was asking about the the due date, the dates that were entered. So again, my date right here is a 3-day task. The start date of my project was the 9th of July. So the first task in the schedule starts as the 9th of July. It's 3 days, so it goes out 3 days. The constraint I have set on my schedule is as soon as possible. So remember those predecessors that we talked about that create those dependencies is what is creating this timeline, right? So I have the 9th, the 11th of July. So this task is dependent on that task completing. So it starts on the 12th to the 12th. Again, we're skipping the weekend, so this task doesn't start until the 15th. Another item that will, again, not that we're going to go over in detail in this call, but another item that will affect this is, of course, your Workamajig calendar if you're putting in non-working days and items like that. Right? So again, you'll see, that this is what's creating the timeline. I'm doing it as soon as possible. So the task is going to happen on the earliest possible date. For that first task, that would be the start date of the project. The predecessors are then creating, again, that timeline and that dependency on that task. Revised copy needs to finish before internal review can start. Internal review needs to, complete before client approval can start. Right? All right. So, right here, I'm just going to leave the schedule. I made a couple of changes. I made some adjustments to that schedule, and I can, save my changes right here, right? And that is my project schedule. Going down the line, you'll see that I have, the ability to create an estimate right here. Now, somebody was asking questions about the dates defaulting in. The one thing you need to double check, the Workamajig way in the project schedule, so I'm just going to jump back really quick, sorry about that, is that your constraint should be as soon as possible for when you're setting up your templates. So the as soon as possible, again, that date will default into the current date structure, right? If you have any other constraint in your template, a must start on, must finish on, or something like that, those require you to set a date, and those dates could follow through on your new project schedule. So you just want to keep track that, again, the template, which should be an as soon as possible, and then you can always, and again, this might be something that you would talk to your account manager on or get a little bit more training on, but if you do have a task within your timeline that has a hard date, something that you don't want to move or change, then you would say, okay, maybe we want to change the constraint on that one particular task, but it shouldn't be set at the template level. All right. So I'm just going to close out here, and we're going to go into the estimate, and we're going to add an estimate right here. So this, again, my estimate name just comes over as my project name. All of our estimates need to have an internal approver. By default, the internal approver is the account manager on the project. Now, you might be saying, well, I never set an account manager on the project. Well, the system is set to default the account manager from the client record. Can it be changed? Absolutely. But, again, that's kind of the default setting within the project here. And then I'm going to just click Save to set up my estimate. Now, this is what my estimate screen looks like. And then, so this is where I can estimate, my costs to the client, right? So we're creating an estimate. The one nice thing about Workamajig is you can create an estimate and provide the estimate to the client to get to get approval from the client to move forward with that. And then once you approve the estimate in Workamajig, it becomes the budget for this project. So you'll be able to work off of what you estimated versus, again, what your actuals would be at a later time, right? So when I come in here into my estimate, I can click into this total labor area right here. And you'll see in my labor area that I have my Workamajig schedule, right? Here's those tasks that I had in the timeline. And here are all of the services or labor or function that we provide in Workamajig, and we have rates for those, right? And I will show you again at the end of this call where you can go and modify your list of services along with the rate structure that you have set up here. So really, what we're looking to do is we're looking to turn how many hours it will take to work on this job, into a total amount of money, right? So one of the things that we don't like to have to do in Workamajig is we don't like to have to do double the work. So we already went through in our template, which carried over into our project, the fact that we allocated hours at each task for different services, right? So Workamajig does have the function to go to more right here and pull from schedule. So what it's going to do is it's going to pull from the schedule the amount of hours that I had allocated for the different services for the different tasks in the timeline. So when I do my pull from schedule, it brings over, and you can see again on my revised copy, just like in the schedule, I had 2 hours of art and creative design and 4 hours of copywriting at $125 an hour, makes a gross of $250 and $460, right? So you can see that these will start to add up right here to make my estimate 19 hours, $2,295, right? Now, if I wanted to, I don't have to stick with that. Like I can make some changes if I decide that the layout, well, we'll go with client approval. Maybe that one is actually going to take 2 hours of account management instead of 1. I can come in here and I can change that. And now you can see again, now I've estimated 20 hours and my total labor cost would be $2,420 to the client. All right. So that's how I can go through and I can, estimate my labor. Now I'm going to close out of this screen right here, and you'll notice that I do have the ability, of course, to estimate my expenses, but that's a whole different webinar that we're going to do in the future about purchasing and how to estimate and put in your actual expenses. But you'll, so you'll be able to see that, but just know that on one estimate, you can estimate your labor and your expenses at the same time. So one thing on here on the estimate, can go to more, and you can go to your estimate settings. Here again are settings all for the estimate, but really what I wanted to point out is the fact that you do have the ability, of course, to print this. This is designed to be a client-facing document, and you can pick what we call an estimate template so that you would be able to design how you want your estimate to look when you print it to the client. This will default in from the client record, and also something else that I'm going to show you when we, as part of the end of the call. But if I go to more and I go to print, right, then you can print your estimate out and you can provide this estimate to the client. Now, again, you can't really go with what you see here. These are customizable, so you can have more summarized, a more summarized version. You can have a more detailed version. You can have, different ways at subtotals. Of course, you can put your logo at the top and everything like that. But just so you know that these are, meant to be printed out and shown to the client right there. So that's my estimate, my $2,420. Now I have an approve button up here. I am the account manager, so I am the one that can approve it. If I am not the account manager, I would have a submit for approval button and I would submit it to them for approval. But as it stands, I am the approver, so I'm going to approve my estimate right here. And remember what I told you, when I approve my estimate, this becomes the budget for my project. So that my budget now for this project is 20 hours at $2,420, right? So when you start putting actual work against this project, you'll be able to see how much did we budget and how much are we actually doing at this time. And of course, Workamajig has a whole lot of notifications and ways to keep track of that information there. Now you can go into your project settings right here just to double check that all the settings as you're setting up this project are looking the way you want, right? If there might be some things you might want to change. But again, generally most of this information either defaulted in from the template that you've set up, the client record that you've set up, or some of your system setup areas, right? So and again, we'll talk about that, but you can just go through and take a look and make sure that everything looks the way you want. And then last but not least, we're going to go to the team tab. So this is where I set up my team of people who will be working on this project with me. So when I click the plus sign, I can pick who should be working on this project, right? Now here I've added, the people on my team, and you can see what came over. My Yosemite Sam is their default service is account management, and I have like Daffy Duck, and these are the different services that they provide that I put in as their default. But you can come over here and you'll see that we have a list of services. And here, and these ones in red, you can read the big blurb if you want to, but the ones in red are pretty much the ones that I have on my approved estimate that I don't have someone on the team providing that. So this is where I can set up my team. I could say, well, my Yosemite Sam is doing account management. I have my Foghorn Leghorn, and I think Foghorn Leghorn is going to be doing my art and creative design on this project. And then Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck are going to share the role of copywriting. So as I set up my team, hopefully I have some people that came over, providing the services that we estimated for, but if not, I can set up my team of people and then I can give them the work that, again, I've estimated for. So then I can go to this button up here called Auto Assign. And what the Auto Assign is going to do is it's going to look at my person. It's going to look at the service that they provide, and it's going to assign this person to any task on my schedule that has the copywriting assigned to it there. So I click on Auto Assign, gives me a blurb. You can read the blurb when you practice this in your own system, and you can click OK, and I'm going to say yes. And so when I leave out of here and I go back into my schedule screen, you'll see now that on each one of my tasks, I have people assigned instead of just services, right? So I have my Foghorn Leghorn. He was working art and creative design. So wherever art and creative design was assigned, now Foghorn Leghorn is assigned to that task. Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck were both providing copywriting. I had copywriting on this task, so it is split between the two. Okay. All right, so that is how the auto assign would work right there. Now, I do have a question to how to put the hours to the schedule to pull your estimate, the pull from schedule. So I'm just going to go back into my estimate here really quick. And that, when you drill down into your labor, your pull from schedule would be under the more. I don't have it because I'm approved and there's no changes to be made, but that's where the pull from schedule was. So that's how you can create your estimate based off the hours in the schedule. And then, the other way around that is some people create their estimate first before they allocate the hours in the schedule. So don't forget, under the team, you have the auto assign, right? So the estimate pulls from the schedule, the auto assign pushes to the schedule. Now, one thing I should point out to you, if you remember, in my estimate, I did change how many hours we were going to do on the client approval. Remember, my allocation was 1. In my estimate, I updated it to 2. So since I pushed from my estimate to my schedule, you'll see that my allocation changed to 2, right? So my allocation now will match my budget, okay? So that's what the push from schedule will do. All right, so you'll see here again where I had my copywriting. I had 2 people working copywriting, so it did split the task between the 2, right? I'm just 1 second while I read a question. Right, so one of the questions I'm getting is just how I had the allocations on the schedule, and that came from my template. I set the allocations in the template, and the template, when I copied over, the allocations for the services came from the template. So that's going to be part of the training. So there's a whole training on how to appropriately set up templates for the Workamajig way. So I encourage anyone who wants to get a little bit more information on how we picture that happening, to set up a call with your account manager. There's a lot of detail going into that we can help you with creating efficiencies and making things a little quicker and a little bit easier on that one. So again, if anyone wants further training on the template piece, there might be a webinar on that in the future. I'm not 100% sure, but also too, your account manager would love to train you on, how to set those up. But that's how those allocations came through originally, was from the template. All right, so one of the questions was kind of the order of things. So the Workamajig way, again, is to create those allocations at the template level, have them pull through into the schedule, and then create an estimate based on those allocations. Some people don't work that way. What they would like to do is they like to create their estimate first to kind of get to a bottom line, like a dollar bottom line or even an hour's bottom line, and then push that information into the schedule. So that's also something that's very doable. You would just have to do a little bit more work in the estimate, because you would have to build your estimate kind of from scratch, and then you would use that team auto assign to push that information, right? So you're still only putting the information maybe in one place, but you would be doing the load of work in the estimate and then pushing it into the schedule. Right? So again, it can go either way, from the schedule to the estimate or the estimate to the schedule. If you do it from the schedule to the estimate, though, you're only having to do the load of work 1 time, and that's in the template. If you're doing it in the estimate, then you would have to do it project by project and build that each project in the estimate. Okay. So that's, again, so there, some people get to the same end, right, from different ways, but when we will work with you either way, but we always like to say, what is the most efficient way to use Workamajig to get the most bang for your buck? And it would be doing the load of the work at the template level. Now, we're not quite done yet. So we went through my schedule, we went through my estimate, we went through our, double checked my project settings, we went to the team and set up the team, and we auto assigned. One last thing we need to do is in our project status right here is my project status, and I will show you these in system setup, I promise, but my project status, we're ready to move forward. So my project status, I created mine and made them super simple. But we went to new, now I'm going to activate this project, right? So this project, we're going to put it possibly in production, might be your project status code or however you want to call that. But when I change this now, it activated my project, and you'll notice that behind the scenes in my project, it now shows up here. What will also happen is if I go and I look at, other dashboards besides the project dashboard in my system, for instance, if I'm a creative person and I go to my Creative Today page, Oops, I don't think I assigned myself to the first one, but we'll we'll find out in just a second. But you'll have tasks that are assigned to you show up in your Creative Today page, right? So that's the last part of that, creating that project, is making sure you activate it or put it in a status that is active so it can start populating people's dashboards. Okay, so I'm going to end there. There's going to be webinars, of course, all about time entry. Also, you know, there'll be webinars about the expense entry and things like that. And we'll probably have some webinars in the future to dive a little bit deeper within the project. But that's, again, the idea of the project setup is to go, you know, again, create those templates. And from the template, you create the project. From that information, you create the estimate and approve the estimate and activate the project. Right? So I am going to show you now some system setup items that we touched on along the way. I'll also show you some defaults that you can put into the client record and defaults that you can put into the employee record that will, again, help smooth the transition into creating these projects, right? So in our admin system setup, the first area I'm going to go to is actually under account information. It's your transaction preferences, and we have a project area right here. So if you guys, any of you were wondering, how did that project number come to be, right? That's this numbering method right here. So you can set the most popular one, and the one defaulted into your system will be a prefix, a client ID, and the next global number, right? So that's going to give you like a 2019 with, you know, well, it's going to say 19 client ID and the next global number, right? You have a lot of different options here that you can choose from if you so choose to, but this is, again, what's coming through on that project numbering method. There are a lot of other settings here, which I caution people coming in and changing and updating and things like that without maybe discussing with your account manager, especially changing anything that says the word require. Don't select or deselect anything that says require until you talk to your account manager, because things like that could definitely change how users are using the project, right? Especially if you require something that they're not used to doing and they can't get past that first screen. But this is the project area, project numbering, right? Now under global lists, sorry, I keep moving my chat around here, but under global lists, a couple of things we talked about, project status codes, right? So project status codes are extremely important in how that project is going to be used. For instance, my project status codes, I kept them pretty simple. I'm a firm believer in really simple status codes. These are, you know, items, again, that are just that you can kind of track where your project is at overall, but it's not something that you have to track where your project is at schedule-wise, because you can always use our traffic and resourcing screens to track where your project is at in the schedule. So I keep mine pretty simple. My new project, like my new status code right here, so I'm creating a new project. My project is not active, it does not allow time, and it does not allow expense entries. Because really what this new status code to me means is I'm setting up the project, it's not ready to go, right? I moved my project from new to active. Active is that project is active, it does allow time entry, and it does allow expense entries to be entered against it. So it's an ongoing active project in production. Completed right here, it's not active, right? We've finished the project schedule. It no longer allows time entry. Nobody else should be working on it anymore, right? But then I have my allow expense entry. Sure, I might still be waiting for some vendor invoices to roll in. They don't roll in immediately, so I might want to leave it open to expense entries because we're not quite done with that portion of it yet. And then I have one closed, not active, doesn't allow time, doesn't allow expense, right? So again, yours might be a little bit more complex than this. This is my test site, right? And I can do what I want. So those are the status codes that I set, but you can certainly, create different status codes for your thing. You can click on insert row to add a new one. Ones you have in the system, you can click on them and just change them if you want to do that. And then if there's one in there you absolutely don't want to use, you can always come over here and delete it. Now it won't let you delete it if you have a project currently using that status code. So just keep that in mind that you might have to go change some projects and make some updates, right, to get them get that status code out of the system. You can also just inactivate a status code, right? That's what this little area right here is, just to inactivate it. That means your projects that are on that status code can stay on it. You just can't use that status for any future projects right there, okay? Another area, we didn't really go into a lot of detail on that, but of course, this is where you can set up your different project types, right? So the project type right here, These are the different project types I have in the system. I can insert a new one. I can delete existing ones. I can overwrite existing ones. You might say, well, what use is the project type? Well, the project type allows you to filter and report off of that type. Again, it allows you to categorize your projects. So you can certainly set up those different project types in the system to track that information right there. Don't forget, this is where your project templates are, right? So you can go into your project templates and this is where you would go and set up those templates. One other thing that we touched on and talked about today is actually under billing options, and these were your services. So your services are your labor or function, role, whatever you want to call it, that you provide in Workamajig, right? So here's your list of services that you have. There's a lot more to it than just what you see when you click on it. The service is associated with a rate right here. And of course, if you're doing billing, it would also be associated with a sales account. But again, these are, items that you can certainly discuss and have further training on with your account manager if you have questions or concerns about your list of services. But that's really what the service is. It's your labor, right? And that labor, again, associates with an hourly rate right here for billing purposes and estimating purposes. Now, another area that we talked about is under our admin manager is our employee record, right? So if I go into an employee record right here, you'll notice when I added my employees to the team of the project, they defaulted in a service, and that default comes from right here, right? So I can put in here my default service. So when I add an employee to the team, it will pull over that default service. If that default service is a service that I estimated for, great, right? Then I have my media planning person or something like that on my project. If not, again, you saw that I could add and load them up on different services that they're going to provide on that project. But if you were wondering where that information came from, it came from the employee record right here, okay? Last but not least, in some of the setup that we discussed today would be actually, I'm going to go to my Workamajig billing menu right here under clients and into my best client ever, because that was the client that I used to create my project. The project defaults right here. We were just talking about the one thing that we touched on when estimating was getting my labor rate from. That's pulling that rate from the service. That's how it pulled those rates into my estimate, right? So it said, hey, there's my list of services and there's my rates. Now, there are many other options to pick rates for your client. And again, that would be something that you can definitely get a little bit more training on. If you have a client that grandfathered in, we have, a feature called service rate sheets and things like that. So you can set a flat rate if you have that. But again, that would all come from the client record when creating a project. Where do my estimated dollars come from and where do my actual dollars come from? They actually default in from the client record. Also under billing, when I went to my defaults here under billing, the reason I'm bringing this one up is you can also default in how do you want those estimates to print. Remember, Workamajig doesn't like you to have to go in and make small updates on every single one. So if you have a client that really likes to see their estimate in summary, then you can create a summary template, and then you can set that at the client record, and it will always default in, and you don't have to go into those estimate settings and set it. If they change, sometimes I like detailed, sometimes I like summary, you can still set a default, but you can just change it at the estimate level. So those are some items that you can set at the client record to, to default in to save you a little bit of time when setting up those projects. All right, so I'm racking my brain, and I think that's pretty much all the information that I was going to show you today for project and estimating. Again, keep an eye on those upcoming webinars. Honestly, I don't even know which ones we have coming up, but let's take a look together. So you might get some more details on what you're looking for right there. So we're doing timesheets, expense reports, and more are on July 16th. So remember, I stopped right before we got to the fun part of actually entering, working tasks and entering time. So that one's next week. We will have one on CRM and one on billing. So again, we're going to take you through the project, as a whole, on how to, handle all of those different areas, right? So that's my spiel on project and estimating. So remember, you can go to our help guide, so support.workamajig.com, and you can just type in webinars in the search field, and when you type in the webinars, you'll see that we have past webinars and we have upcoming webinars. right? So you can always go into the help guide to view our past webinars, which again, this one will be on there in a couple days. And then you can also go through and look to see what upcoming ones are there, and you can sign up for those webinars. All right, so I'm going to just keep an eye on the chat for another minute or two to see if any questions come through, but don't forget, you can email support@workamajig.com. Your account managers will be happy to answer any questions or concerns, or to go in a little bit more in depth with you on how to set up the Workamajig way to make it happen for you guys and walk you through that. All right. All right, let's see. Does it have invoices? Let's see. There is not a way to have invoices default to an estimate description that I'm aware of. That would be a question you might need to email into support and just have them do a little bit of research on that one. That's one I would have to take a look at to see if our new invoice layouts can do that. So you might need to email support on that. Someone's asking, when you assign team members, what if one person does 2 different tasks and both tasks are in the job? So absolutely, again, remember, we're assigning them at the service level. So if they're doing 2 different services that are on 2 different tasks, they can certainly do that. Let me go back into my schedule here really quick, because I think I had someone assigned to 2 different tasks. It could be a liar. But you can see my Yosemite Sam here is assigned to my internal review and my client approval. They were doing account management on both of those. And also, again, if you had 2 different services you provided, you can actually be assigned to the same task twice with 2 different services. So if my Yosemite Sam was doing account management and copywriting, they could be assigned to the same task twice with 2 different services that they needed to provide. Okay, so again, it all comes down to when you set up that team and you have the auto assign, it looks here, right? And it's going to assign you to any one of those tasks where that's at. It doesn't matter if you're, again, if these are both on the same task or they're on different tasks, it's going to assign you throughout, and it will assign you to the different service, right? All right. Oops, sorry, I didn't scroll. I need to scroll. All right. So you cannot bypass scheduling and open a project and use estimating. The estimate is, we do have estimates that are not based on the schedule. So I guess you can. We have a service-only estimate that you can create a service-only estimate, and you would be able to budget at the service. But truthfully, you have to enter time or actually add time to the project. You have to have a task. It's a requirement in Workamajig. So you kind of have to have at least 1 task on a project to be able to function that way there. And the project manager and account manager employee type, I mean, those are, again, just 2 different roles in the agency. So you can have an account manager is typically, let's just say, more client side, where the project manager is more agency side that manages the project, the timeline, and the budget, where the account manager, again, is you kind of working, with the client and, and keeping track of the project that way. Not every agency has that division of labor, though. A lot of account managers do the role of both account manager and project manager. So if anyone's wondering why I'm rambling about this, I probably should have read the question out loud, but they were just asking the main difference between the project manager and account manager employee type, right? So again, sometimes there's not a difference, right? There's no difference between the 2, and sometimes there's a big division of duties in that one. And Workamajig is, I think, in the next release, it could be the next release or the one after that. I'd have to take a look. We are actually adding a field for project manager, right? So we've always had account managers or field, and the account manager is kind of the approval for estimates and the approver for invoices and things like that. But we are now also adding that division of labor where we would also be able to track who a project manager is on a project. They're asking, when you type in the description when setting up the project, where does it show up? Well, it can show up on dashboards and things like that, but it also, when you click to look at your assignments, you can see the project description, but some people use that project description to have it appear on their invoice. So you can actually have a project description show up on your estimate or on your invoice, right? So you can make it client facing so that they would be able to, this project is about this, or this, right? You can type in a blurb, there's carriage returns, you can do all of that, and you can have it show up on an invoice. Some people only use that for internal use, just to give, again, a basic description of the project so people working on the project have a better understanding of what that project is all about. All right. Any other questions that I can help you guys with? Okay, so the client codes, if you're talking about like the client ID would be in the client record. Someone's asking how to change client codes. And in the company info, you can change the client ID. That's the client ID right there. All right, any other questions? All right, I'm gonna leave this open for 2 more minutes. If anyone thinks of something, they can, pop into the chat and type that in. If not, you guys have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. All right, so one of the questions was changing the client code and then setting up notifications. So the notifications are in the employee record, and you can set up notifications right here for different notifications that you would want that employee to get. So here I'm in the employee record, notifications, these are the different notifications. There is some setup that goes along with that, with what time you want those notifications to go out, and that would be in your system setup, right? Oops, my chat keeps kind of getting in the way there. And then in your transaction preferences, your notification options, you can set up notifications there, right? And then also your daily emails, you can set up what time you want those emails to go out, right? And then the client code, changing the client code, that's in your billing, clients. Sorry, my computer, there we go, client codes. And then under company info, this is where the client code is. All right. So just remember, you can, I'm going to shut this webinar down in just 1 second. Just remember, you can access all the webinar support, right? .workamajig.com. Just type in webinar and you can search any past webinars and you can look at any of the upcoming webinars. There is the feature now that you can choose to follow and it will notify you when any new webinars updated to the past webinars or when any webinars, added to the upcoming ones. So just, and like I said, this webinar, if you want to follow along with this webinar will be on the help guide probably in a couple days. All right, so I'm going to let you guys all go. You have a wonderful day. And if there were any questions that I missed or you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to email support@workamajig.com. We will be happy to answer any of those follow-up questions.